The United States spent billions of dollars to construct a brand new stealth bomber that is much smaller and carries far fewer weapons than the 30-year-old plane it replaces. Everyone calls this a downgrade. Critics look at the missing payload capacity and scream that the military lost its edge. Those people are dead wrong. This machine represents an undeniable triumph, and I can prove it. Engineers took the most advanced aviation program in human history and stripped it down to the bone. The B-21 Raider does not represent a retreat. It stands as a direct admission that the original B-2 Spirit suffered from a catastrophic design mistake, a 30-year-old blunder that cost billions. Now, the Pentagon finally fixed it. They shrunk the jet. Designers cut the weapons bay in half. The iconic tail vanished. Done. Gone. That is a brutal pivot. A strictly necessary one. You have to understand what planners got wrong in the 1980s before you can see why this new weapon is terrifyingly brilliant. The B-2 Spirit remains a legend, an unrivaled icon. You see that distinctive batwing silhouette, and you instantly recognize it. A 172-foot wingspan of raw composite intimidation. We were always told that signature W-shaped tail was built to scatter radar waves, a stroke of engineering genius to make the giant aircraft vanish in the sky. That was a lie. Well, a very convenient half-truth. That sawtooth trailing edge is actually a scar, a permanent physical reminder of a mission. The aircraft never even flew. When the Advanced Technology Bomber contract started in October 1981, Northrop drew up an unusually clean flying wing. No jagged edges, no severe structural compromises, just smooth lines cutting through the air. It was elegant. It was exactly what the pioneers of aviation always envisioned. But then the Pentagon intervened. Defense planners looked at a masterpiece and panicked. To grasp what was lost, you need to know about Jack Northrop, the visionary obsessed with the flying wing. In 1980, he lived out his final days in retirement, ill, barely able to walk or speak. The military granted him a special security clearance just so he could hold a scale model of the secret B-2 design. Running his hands over the smooth edges, the old man grabbed a notepad. He wrote that he finally knew why God kept him alive for 25 years. Because this secret bomber shared the exact physical dimensions of his canceled YB-49 project from the 1940s. Tears fell as he held that model. His life's work felt validated at last. Beautiful. Perfect. But that unblemished design never reached the production line. 3 years later, the United States Air Force forced a change that butchered the clean concept. Generals compromised the aerodynamics to satisfy a nightmare scenario. Early 1983 changed everything. Military planners started sweating over advanced Soviet surface-to-air missiles. Command demanded the bomber fly extremely low to the ground, hugging the terrain to slide beneath enemy radar nets. Think about that for a second. You possess a delicate, stealth-coated flying wing. Now command wants to slam it through dense, turbulent air right off the deck. A clean wing simply snaps under that kind of violent stress, which meant engineers tore up the blueprints. Development stopped dead in its tracks. A 2-year delay followed just to redesign the entire back half of the aircraft. Fabricators reinforced the internal structure. They added that heavy, sawtooth trailing edge and extra control surfaces specifically to handle low-altitude turbulence. That decision destroyed the pristine aerodynamics, all to survive a single threat. Then came the punchline, a multi-billion-dollar joke on the American taxpayer. The Legacy Spirit flew for the first time in 1989. Testing worked. The airframe survived the redesign, but in December 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed entirely. Gone, just like that. That formidable low-altitude air defense network, this bomber was butchered to survive evaporated overnight. Engineers compromised the stealth profile. Program managers added immense structural weight. The timeline suffered years of delays. For nothing. America's new bomber entered service carrying the dead weight of a canceled apocalypse. This jet spent its entire career flying high-altitude missions anyway. It never used the low-altitude capability that forced the redesign. Every single Spirit carries that jagged scar on its tail for no operational reason at all. Such an engineering tragedy. So how do you fix a mistake that big? Subscribe to this channel and you'll start noticing. How many billion-dollar military decisions are just cover-ups for old panic attacks? The real cost of that 1983 redesign went far beyond the 2-year delay. Maintenance nightmares became the ultimate penalty. Look at what happened when Jerry McBrady and his team rebuilt a heavily damaged aircraft known as AV-890129. Complex work on that modified composite wing was agonizing. This plane is simply too intricate, too fragile. Extreme upkeep demands meant the Air Force bled money, keeping the small fleet operational. You have a gargantuan machine with sensitive structural compromises sitting in climate-controlled hangars because its delicate radar-absorbent tape degrades in humidity. Every flight hour demands over 60 hours of intense maintenance on the ground. That is an unsustainable equation. On December 2nd, 2022, Northrop Grumman rolls out the B-21 Raider. Everyone expected a bigger, faster, heavily armed beast. Instead, leadership revealed a plane that looked like it shrank in the wash. This new Raider drops the wingspan from its predecessor's expansive width down to 140 feet. Internal payload capacity fell from 40,000 pounds on the legacy jet to an estimated 30,000 pounds on the new platform. Those twin weapons bays? Gone. Designers shrunk the Raider down to use a single internal weapons bay. On paper, it looks terrible. Less payload, smaller size, a step backward in raw, destructive capability. Military armchair generals lost their minds. Why did they shrink it? Critics missed the entire point. The Pentagon cut the bomber down because they finally understood the math of modern warfare. You do not win wars with 21 airplanes. That is the total number of legacy bombers the United States ever built. 21. Original program costs averaged out to $2.1 billion per plane when you factor in all the research and development. $2.1 billion. If you lose one aircraft to a mechanical failure or a lucky shot, 5% of your entire global stealth fleet vanishes. Unacceptable. Therefore, Command demanded a machine they could afford to mass produce. Projected unit costs for the Raider sit at $700 million. Rather than redesigning every component from scratch, engineers used pre-existing commercial digital technologies and off-the-shelf subsystems to prevent cost overruns. This means physical assembly prices remain stable, while manufacturing efficiency scales up. Volume changes everything. Procurement plans call for a minimum of 100 Raiders. 100. That spreads logistical burdens across a resilient network. Volume over vanity. Every single time. If this breakdown is hitting different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more people who need to hear the proven facts. Let's look closely at the Raider's frame. Notice what is missing. That sawtooth tail is completely gone. By April 2026, official overhead photos in flight confirmed it. Engineers went right back to the cleaner, straight-edged wing concept originally planned decades ago. They achieved this by building a complete digital twin of the airframe in a secure cloud environment, before a single piece of metal was cut. This allowed technicians to simulate aerodynamic stresses and model advanced composite structures with high precision, avoiding the physical trials that plagued the previous generation. Mechanics also pushed the engine exhaust much further forward on the body. This buries the heat signature deep inside the frame, making the jet drastically harder to track from above. They perfected the aerodynamics and improved the thermal shielding in one ruthless redesign. Let's clear up a widespread misconception right now. Do not call this plane invisible. It is not invisible. The technical term is low observable. Low-frequency search radars can indeed detect the aircraft in the sky. Operators know something is up there. But there is a sharp difference between seeing a shadow on a screen and putting a missile on a target. High-frequency targeting radars cannot lock onto the smooth, radar-absorbent skin. Signals slip right through the firing solutions. The enemy knows you are in their airspace, yet they cannot guide a weapon to hit you. Sound terrifying? That is the brutal reality of modern stealth. It is not magic. This is physics. By shrinking the wingspan and smoothing out that jagged tail, the Raider presents a deeply frustrating profile. You can watch it bomb you, and you can do absolutely nothing about it. This lean philosophy infected the entire testing program. Defense contracts usually drag on for decades. Deadlines slip. Budgets explode. Not this time. November 10th, 2023. The first Raider completed its maiden flight and touched down at Edwards Air Force Base. By January 23rd, 2024, the government had already awarded the initial production contract. Nobody waited around. Then came September 11th, 2025. A second test aircraft arrived at Edwards, instantly doubling the program's testing capacity. Crews ran parallel checks on mission systems and flight capabilities simultaneously. Unheard of in modern military procurement. Managers cut the red tape. Building a smaller, simpler jet meant testers could validate it exponentially faster. The results surprised everyone. May 7th, 2026. Northrop Grumman made an announcement that shattered every expectation in the aerospace industry. The combined test force had a scheduled 180-day testing cycle. Teams finished it in 73 days. 73. Pilots knocked out half of their planned test goals in less than 3 months. How does that even happen? It happens because General Dale White pushed everyone relentlessly. He demanded speed. Leadership emphasized relentless urgency without taking reckless risks. When you build an aircraft without severe structural compromises, test flights perfectly match the computer simulations. March 10th, 2026 proved it. That first jet executed a grueling 5.5-hour flight test. The pilot deliberately flew through wake turbulence. The plane hooked up behind a tanker for refueling checks. Everything passed flawlessly. This ruthless efficiency paid off immediately. That accelerated testing cycle directly led to an $11.8 billion contract value secured by the manufacturer in early 2026. The Pentagon looked at the 73-day miracle and opened the checkbook. Brass finally possessed a program that delivered exactly what it promised, ahead of schedule. Think about the technological contrast. Legacy bombers required manual hardware overhauls just to update their radar systems, trapping them in decades of sluggish developmental cycles. This new Raider uses an open mission systems architecture. This software-defined backbone allows the military to integrate new electronic warfare packages, radar software, and weapon systems overnight without cutting open the fuselage. It is a developmental revolution. Planners stopped trying to make one static airframe do everything. The Air Force accepted the reduced payload limit. Command embraced the single weapons bay. They traded theoretical perfection for immediate operational reality. Consider the tactical geometry of a greatly expanded fleet. When your bomber inventory is practically non-existent, every single deployment becomes a geopolitical crisis. Commanders hesitate to risk fragile assets in contested airspace because the replacement cost is devastating. The Raider flips that defensive mindset on its head. A sprawling network of smaller aircraft means you can attack multiple theaters simultaneously. You can lose a jet and keep fighting. Strategic planners traded raw, carrying capacity for the ability to strike from dozens of different directions at once. A single internal weapons bay remains entirely sufficient when you have an overwhelming swarm in the air. The enemy air defense grid has to track and intercept a flood of incoming threats instead of focusing on one colossal target. Mass numbers overwhelm their computing power. Swarm tactics break their defensive logic entirely. Leadership also made a key decision about the people inside the cockpit. For years, rumors circulated that the new bomber would be completely unmanned. a drone. Just a server rack in the sky taking orders from a bunker in Nevada. In July 2026, the Air Force officially killed that theory. The combat raider will operate with a 2-pilot crew. Human beings are still flying the strike missions, and pilots are already in the seat. On June 11, 2026, an operational military pilot flew the jet for the very first time during testing. Not just a company test aviator, a real combat flyer. That marked the historic transition from engineering development straight into operational training. Instructors do more than prove the jet works on a spreadsheet. They are teaching active warfighters how to kill with it. The timeline is moving at blinding speed, and the hardware is keeping up. The United States military finally learned its lesson. You don't build a gold-plated mega bomber for a threat that might vanish tomorrow. You build a sleek, efficient, mass-producible killer. This new Raider is smaller. The frame carries fewer bombs. The jet features a shorter wingspan. And that is exactly why it is the most lethal aviation project of the 21st century. Engineers fixed the aerodynamic scars. Maintenance nightmares were slashed completely. The government bought a large fleet instead of a handful. Generals realized that true tactical supremacy isn't about the biggest payload on a single airframe. It is about having a network so reliable, so stealthy, and so numerous that the enemy cannot possibly track them all. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe. There is so much more to cover.